Depending on the study and depending on how you define success, some studies indicate that up to 80% of all ERP implementations result in failure. Why do they fail? What are the common themes that you can see in failed implementations, and how can you avoid an implementation failure? That's what I want to talk about today. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney. For over 20 years, I have drafted and negotiated a variety of software-related contracts and litigated failed software projects in courts across the country. The failure rate of ERP projects is incredibly high. One recent study estimated that only 16% of ERP projects are actually successful. Another 50% are challenged. And so what that means for you as you're about to embark on a ERP implementation project or a digital transformation is that the cards are very much stacked against you. What are some of the typical reasons for failure? Well, ERP projects are not normal software development projects. ERP systems often form the backbone of a company and how that company is run. They effectively act as a spinal cord in the nervous system of any organization. They are complex and they are notoriously challenging to implement. And unfortunately, that is kind of par for the course. And I think there's enough blame to go around with respect to customers underestimating the complexity of the project. But you've got to also look at these vendors. These salespeople are there to sell software, and what they're incented by is, commissions and getting you to sign on the bottom line. What does not serve them well, what they're not incented by, is telling you how difficult and complex the process is going to be, how cumbersome the technology might be, that it needs to be customized, modified, configured at a substantial cost. No, they're not going to necessarily volunteer that type of information. Instead, what they're going to tell you is, this is innovative software and technology. It incorporates the latest and greatest artificial intelligence tools. It can be implemented in a matter of months. It doesn't need to be customized. It's configurable. It's going to be kind of a simple and easy process. They will tell you, hey, we've got internal methodologies and systems that really mitigate the likelihood of a failure and the complexity of the system. SAP, for example, has SAP Grow, SAP Rise. And I think those kinds of representations really do a customer disservice, and really it does the vendor a disservice as well, because when you underestimate certainly the complexity, or the complexity is misrepresented to you, you don't plan the way you should. You don't devote enough resources to that project to make it successful. You have unrealistic expectations as far as the cost, the timeline, the resources that you need to devote to it. And you get into the middle of that implementation and you realize, hey, the implementation is going to take 30 months. It's not going to take 18 months like the vendor told us. And so now you've got to make decisions. You've got a board, you've got people that you're accountable to, and you've got to figure out how to get this project over the finish line successfully. And what that ends up leading to many times in the cases that we deal with are people cutting corners. Instead of implementing all the functionality that they want, they focus on getting a minimally viable product up and running and decide to deal with all the complexity later once they're on the system. Suffice it to say, that's not a good solution. They don't invest enough in organizational change management. Again, something that can be incredibly problematic. They don't adequately test the software. They don't adequately test deliverables. They let milestones slip. They cut the size of the project team, all to try to keep it under budget and to keep it on time. And inevitably what this leads to is a higher rate of failure associated with that particular implementation. And so I think it's incumbent upon not only vendors certainly, but customers in particular, to really go into this thing with their eyes wide open and have an understanding of exactly what they are getting into. And some of the other key contributors to failure really are, I think, companies that do not have an understanding of what their business goals are with respect to the technology. They lead with a technology first mentality. They don't necessarily have a fully formed business case to justify the implementation of that software. They don't understand what business results they need to achieve for the system to be considered a success. They don't understand the nature of the legacy systems that are going to be replaced. They may not know the extent of what needs to be replaced because of the new software, or they may not know exactly how that old software operated and how the new software is going to operate differently from that prior software. And this can really lead to business disruption. This can lead to issues associated with over-customization of the software, which increases cost and increases the timeline and adds in unnecessary or just complexity. It's complexity into the system that maybe wouldn't be there if you weren't trying to customize it so much. I think you've got to look at customizations carefully. You want to only make those customizations that are truly necessary to accommodate gaps in functionality that really are important to your business. They constitute, whatever your secret sauce is, whatever your business differentiator is from your competitors, that you need to maintain. Those are the kinds of things that will justify customizations. But certainly, customizing the system to make it look like the old system really isn't a viable approach, and that's something that can definitely lead to failure. In the cases we deal with, we will see a lot of customers that don't have a plan for achieving their goals. They've not reviewed their business processes. They have not done any kind of a gap analysis to understand the differences between the new system's functionality and their current business processes, which I think is a recipe for absolute disaster. If you don't have an understanding of your business processes and you don't understand where the gaps are in that functionality with respect to those processes, you're setting yourself up for failure. Many clients that we see in failed implementations have not engaged enough with adequate project management. They are diverting their employees from other areas of the company to work part-time on the implementation, which is a problem. Or alternatively, the project managers that they do hire are inexperienced. They're either inexperienced with their particular business, they're new to the company, they don't understand the business, they don't understand the particular vendor's technology, they've never done that type of an implementation before. And so that is certainly something that can contribute to the failure of a system. Many times you will see inadequate training because a customer does not devote enough resources to training. They don't want to implement a train-the-trainer approach. They want to push that back on the vendor, or they won't really engage enough in training at all, or they will fail to adequately test deliverables or certain aspects of functionality. All of these things are problematic and can lead to the failure of an ERP implementation. What do you do? What's the pathway out of this? And I think you really have to have an understanding of your business processes. You have to have a business case that is going to be addressed by the implementation and integration of this new software functionality. If you're just implementing technology because you need to be on the newest technology, again, that is a problem. This is business software that needs to address business issues, and you've got to have an understanding of why you're implementing the software. You need to have an understanding of your current state. You need to have an understanding of what your future state needs to look like. You've got to have flexibility in the way that you're going to get there. And you certainly need to commit the necessary resources to make your implementation successful. And that means having your own project team that is working on your side along with the vendor's project team. You want to engage third-party consultants. You want to engage experts. You want software evaluation consultants. You want to have people that are going to be negotiating these contracts for you. I mean, you want to give yourself as many dogs in that fight as you possibly can. If you're just going to trust the vendor and hope that this implementation works out well, it probably is not. And I think that is something that is going to come back and bite you at the end of the day if that's the approach that you're going to rely on. So I think there are a lot of things you can do to mitigate the likelihood of a failure and to come out of this thing better than you were when you entered into it. If you have any questions about any of the issues I've talked about in this video, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you and get you pointed in the right direction.